Well, for a bit more on this, I'm joined now in studio by Martin Schaefer, who is from the German Embassy. Martin, thank you. Welcome for your time.
Pleasure to be here.
So, after 6 months of sort of political turmoil in Germany, Angela Merkel, she's been re-elected for a fourth term, but as far as I understand, that margin was very close, a mere 9 votes. Talk us through sort of the significance of this re-election and this time of political turmoil.
Well, I think a majority is a majority. And I do think after 6 months of difficult negotiations, we are going to see a stable government, the fourth government of Angela Merkel. It was the first time in the history of democratic Germany that coalition negotiations in the first attempt have failed. So that's why it took so long. And in our tradition, it is very important to sort out the possibly difficult and painful and politically sensitive issues before you engage in a new government, so that you have all the right answers, all the right compromises, so at the end of the day the government can be stable for the next 4 years.
Well, let's talk about this new government, because there are some new faces, and especially in the sort of key ministries like the finance ministry, and people are talking about this fragile coalition.
I don't think it's going to be fragile.
Okay.
The Conservatives and the Social Democrats are engaging for the third time now in a coalition under the leadership of Angela Merkel. Indeed, there will be a couple of ministries where the ministers come now from different political parties, including the Ministry of Finance. We are very much used to that. We are going to welcome the new ministers as good as we possibly can, and I do think that this government can hit the ground running.
So they've demonstrated that they can work together, that the coalition will last.
Well, I think it's somewhat of an example for other countries too, such as South Africa. Yeah. I think we have a long tradition where no political party will ever get an absolute majority. So you are used to and you need to engage in political compromises in order to form a stable government. And for that to do, you need people that trust each other and that are willing to accept that the others have their political agendas too, and you need to find the right compromises. And I think on Europe, on relations to and with Africa, on all the issues of domestic policy that are important for the German people, this government has found good choices. So I'm very confident that we are going to see a stable government that will reach out to its European partners and that will forge new relations with Africa.
So let's talk about the relations then with Africa and with South Africa. How, in this new government, how do you see those going ahead?
Well, Germany was at the helm of the G20 last year, and one of the big, maybe the biggest German initiative was to found what we call the Compact for Africa. And the idea is to get, well, almost 70% of the GDP of the world, which is the G20 countries, to invest more and better and more efficiently in Africa. And we have been doing this together with the government of South Africa. I have welcomed here in recent days delegations from Germany who engage with their South African counterparts to prepare, now that we have 2 stable governments, both in Pretoria and in Berlin, to see that we can really improve the investment climate on this continent and to make sure that private investors flock into the continent and in particular into South Africa. And I see South Africa maybe as the most important pillar of that strategy, because from here and from South Africa investments will be done on the rest of the continent.
So having said that and having engaged with your delegation from Germany, are they positive about the new changes that we've seen recently in South Africa?
We have never seen a coalition agreement in Germany that is so much focused on Africa. There is Africa all over the place. I think there's a deep conviction in German politics, as in Europe, that sister continents need to look at each other and work together because our destinies are deeply intertwined. And I can safely say there's a lot of euphoria about the new South Africa, the new dawn, as people call it here, about the renewal that the new government and the new president has promised to the South African people and to the world. And I can only say, we as Germans, we hold out our hands. We are willing to contribute to transformation and help attain the goals that this government has set itself.
So we've looked at Africa. Let's look at Europe and how Merkel will approach a sort of very fractious EU. What kind of challenges does she have going into approaching the EU dynamics?
Well, I would say in the last decade we had three major real crises in Europe. The financial crisis that started about 10 years ago, the refugee crisis a couple of years ago, and then we have to deal, if we want it or not, with the decision of the British people to leave the European Union with the Brexit. I do think that in terms of overcoming the financial crisis, we have gone long ways. In Germany, we have a situation where there's no unemployment, where the state coffers are full, where we produce excellence, where we can reduce public debt. So there's a lot of room for investment into Europe, investment into beneficial relations with Africa, and investment in a European Union, even without the United Kingdom, that shows more optimistically than they did in the past into the future. And I think the European Union continues to be the biggest trade bloc in the world. We are an area in which peace, the rule of law, and democracy reigns. And still, I think the European Union is, to many other regions in the world, a good example.
And quickly, before we run out of time here, what of the refugee crisis?
Well, the refugee crisis has, without any doubt, caused a lot of problems within the member states of the European Union, including in Germany, but also between the member states of the European Union. It has taken some time in a system where everybody has to have a say to find the right and the proper answers and the right majorities for that. I do think that now, 2.5 years after the height of the crisis, with numbers of refugees from the Arab world, from Africa coming down, we have found solutions in terms of a proper border management, in terms of upholding the rule of law, in terms of upholding the fundamental principle of political asylum, that we have come together in Europe, and we will find good solutions for the future.
All right, we'll leave it there. Martin, thank you very much for your time. Martin Schaefer joining me from the German Embassy.
Thank you.